This morning as I changed the battery chargers over, it's cold. Man, I didn't think it was going to be this cold today. I was planning on doing some painting. What I'm going to plan on now is drinking some coffee. But every day I come out here and I look at these parts and I think, wow, you know, the extra time we put into this, and I'm hoping within the next day or so Steve's going to be able to be out here. Wow, this is going to be nice. We are really going to have a, this is going to be a nice bike. We're going to have a great summer coming up. Now every day of my life is always an adventure. I have to get up in the morning. I call it sequencing, but for me the real word is I got to plan a way to stay inside the house today and drink a lot of coffee. I try to plan my life out, and especially my winter. It's a long winter up here. And I try to plan it out so I always have some indoor job just for days like this. It's in the teens this morning. And Luciano and I are already thinking of things we can do. Seats and tank combinations. But I know one thing. A GS 1100 tank fits right on an RD with a minimum of work. We've already done that mod already. For the future, we need a project. I'm already thinking of next year's project. And the big 5.5 gallon tank is great with an RD because then it gives you some range. Normally you basically just have a 100-mile bike. It gives you a lot of, and Luciano did it on one of his RDs. I think it's the one Ray still has. Anybody that doesn't know, these fish hibernate all winter, but we do have to keep a hole in the ice. So every morning I have to chop ice. So back in the house after a cup of coffee. Steve is supposed to come over tomorrow. Hopefully that'll work out for him and we can get that part sanded out and ready for clear, but we're not going to paint anything today. It's just too cold. So the things I have to work around today, I got my marching orders for Legoland here. I got to find something to fill the time that's available today on that project table. Now we basically have the seat done. The fender is done. These are ready to mount on a bike actually. And I guess the next part, the tank is ready for clear, but it's way too cold. My hands will be frozen out there. And I've painted in this cold weather already. And just getting too old for that action right now. So I guess the easiest part here is to get the wet sanding and get this ready for the next step. That's why we always try to sequence this out so there's always something ready to sand, something ready to buff, something ready to paint. Okay, so I guess the only thing we're going to do that's going to be productive here, we got some 1200 Merca, some soapy water, and we'll try to get this part ready for the next date it's going to be available that we can paint outside. It's definitely not going to be today. Now, I don't think it's even going to be a problem to sand this out because the paint has been drying for a while, a couple of weeks anyway. And what I want to do, I want to try to get this in a position that I can do a little test. I always do my little test. Pick any little spot. Just make sure the paint has cured out the way I expect it to. Again, what I'll do is I'll divide this part up into, like the United States map, I'll do half of this, a segment, the stripe. The only thing when I go over the stripe, I want to make sure it's perfectly level. But what I'm looking for is any chewing gum at all on the paper. I don't think I'll have that. And I expect a part like this is going to take me between an hour and 2 hours. Might be all I get done. You never know in my life, you never know what's coming down the pike. But could be Legoland any minute now. you just never know. But anyway, once you get a little test, the 1200 seems to be, see, I'm trying to come up with for this project, the combination has been real good of letting the parts dry, the 1200 sandpaper and then 2500 on the final part. That's a nice combination. It's very, very predictable, very easy to do. there's no part of this part that isn't really flat. Going over the stripe will be the most labor intensive of all. I have my little nail file if I have to get in the corners. Let me just show this real quick. I try to do as much as I can without camera cuts, or you can just see what that, let's look at it. Now that really did sand out. Now the only part, again, I repeat this over and over again, but when we get to the stripe, I want to be able to run my hand over the stripe in every dimension and not feel the stripe. And this, if it was a warmer day, this paint would have cured up a lot quicker. As it is, being under the heating vent helps, but we'll eventually, by the end of this session, we'll have that whole part nice and flat, and it will be ready for the next coat of clear. Now, working the stripe is always the hardest part of this. That's where the most work will go into, to trying to get that flat, of course. And it's really there's just no substitute. I try to do a lot of it. Just move the sandpaper in different directions. Don't get caught up in doing one motion. In the beginning of any of these jobs, it always seems overwhelming. And even after all these years, after 50 plus years of painting, I come down to the shop and I go, oh, I gotta sand that part. And then 2 or 3 hours later, it's done, and I go, oh, that went pretty good. And I know all of these jobs that are very big, and sanding this part is a big job. If you just take it one little piece at a time. I'm not trying to do the whole, I'm trying to do one little piece, then maybe cut this stripe into 3 pieces. It seems to work pretty well. Now another thing, I'll take the sandpaper and turn it so I'm using the other edge. And you can actually feel when the sandpaper gets, it feels like you're sanding, you know, it's smooth, and all of a sudden when you move it, it's gritty and it cuts. Anyway, Karen is up there making the house smell like soup again today. Oh my God, I'm getting hungry. I'm always hungry. That's funny. Anyway, not to belabor the point, we've got one segment at a time of this, and by the end of this session, hopefully, if all else goes right and Legoland, if Wendy's shop doesn't turn into Legoland prematurely, this will be ready to go for clear. So if you always evaluate the orange peel, painted this on a cold day, usually that results in a little orange peel. If I run my hand over that right now, I cannot feel the stripe. Now the trick is, the best trick of all, as soon as you can't feel it, stop. Because you don't want to run at risk of going down into the edge, and if you do, you have a touch-up, of course. Just, it's annoying when that happens. But I want to go from the orange peel to flat, that the whole part is flat like this. Go from shine to flat, and that will get us ready for the next coat of clear. Just as a point of reference, that's why it's good to have this bar, not only for hanging apart when the clear is dry, and it supports it. Right now, without that bar, this bar would be like an octopus, just with all the loose pieces flapping around. So I have learned a lesson, and in the past, as soon as you have a fairing to do, make some kind of a support. Just makes a day like today a lot easier. This piece is very, very awkward. That's why I mentioned that. That's good. As I'm moving it around, this moves a little bit. So what I'm trying to, I don't want to put any more stress on it than I have to. I want to just very gently do these edges. I don't want to go through any edge if I don't have to. The paint is sanding out like butter, which is to my advantage here. And as I'm doing this, you can actually feel once the part is starting to get smooth. And I don't know why, but at this point in the job, I know we're coming down a home stretch here. In a week or so, we should have all the parts sanded out, even if they're predicting snow coming our way. And I always try to stack the deck, and I always try to have something. I even have some indoor stuff. I'm not going outside today. So, and we got work to do on Steve's project. I like to stay busy through the winter. The winter is, I always tell people up here, if you don't live in this part of the country, it's a long winter. If you have projects to work on, if you have whatever, even working on your house, it seems like the winter goes by a lot quicker than if you don't have a project. Anyway, little by little, this part's coming together, and as you can imagine, I'm looking forward to seeing it ready for clear, and it will be by the end of this session. In some of these areas, now if I didn't have that bar, some of these areas are really delicate. I really want to be extremely careful I don't put a crack in this paint. Once the windshield is installed, then it's relatively stiff, but right now it's very vulnerable to being broken or whatever, damaged in some way. And we put so much work into this part. If you haven't seen this video from the very beginning, and I'm sure some people haven't, to be sure, I started off buying a brand new part for AirTech, but it was not an exact replacement. It was for a different model, a different year, and it turns out that it was my fault. I ordered it incorrectly, and it'll hopefully get used up on my RD project one way or another for next year. I'm already planning next year's project, but I always used to do the same thing in modeling too. I'd always be 1 year ahead. Even though I live in the present sometimes, my mind is always thinking of the future. Anyway, as I wipe this down, I'm coming up on a halfway point. This is usually when I'll go see what Karen's doing, have a bowl of soup or a cup of coffee or something or whatever. Anyway, that's really coming out nice. One of the places it's almost impossible to get to if you don't have one of these soft sanding sticks is down into any of these scoop areas. And I remember doing Vlad Suzuki, there was so many of these scoops. There were scoops within scoops. But anyway, this is a really handy way. When you go to get your finger in there, you find out it's not as easy as you think it is. There's just a lot of things that are awkward. That this part, this little trick, it's worth watching a whole video just for that trick. The soft sanding sticks, they're available at, and Karen buys them at the beauty supply. I don't know what the name of the place is. I think it's Face Values, but I'm not sure. I'm sure you can buy them online. It's from Amazon. It's not a big deal. But the whole key is they're soft, they bend, they get inside corners and angles and edges, and they really help you with detail sanding. They really are. They really are useful. Now the next thing is the touch up on this, and I got to take my time on that. It's amazing to me how useful this little tool is, and I'm just going to give you an example. A spot this would be difficult to get your finger down into that groove. The little sanding sticks makes it really easy. These were so handy when you're doing little corners and edges and angles, and just super handy. Anyway, we're coming in on almost having this part done. Very handy for this kind of an area. There's just so many spots it's useful for, but then the last thing I'm going to go over this whole part under the on the workbench double lights and see if I need any touch-ups or any spot I've missed, or I want to be really ultra fussy. This is going to be, of course, this and the gas tank are the parts right up on top of the bike that you're going to see. And when I get the extra clear on this and it's buffed out, this should look every bit as nice as the seat, I'm hoping. And it's just a question of if you do all the detailing between steps like this. Now this is a step a lot of people skip. They just go put more clear on and then buff it, then do the buff thing. And I think maybe you could get away with that under certain conditions, but on a part like this, a lot of curves, a lot of angles, a lot of edges, I'm not so sure that's what I want. But anyway, not to belabor the point, we put our whole morning into this part, and pretty soon it's going to be Legoland here. So trying to finish this up. Oh man, I tell you, when you get to the end of doing a part like this, you feel like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but then you look in a mirror and you realize you're not Arnold Schwarzenegger at all. Here's where our soft nail file is going to come in real handy, because we got a lot of little corners and I got to support this with my hand. I can't just press down. When we join these two pieces, I was real careful to get plenty of epoxy inside, and of course that's where the headlight is going to go, inside that scoop. So this is going to be just one of the parts I've got to detail sand very, very carefully. You're up here, you have a big flat area, you don't have to be too careful, but down here it's very easy to go through an edge. I like to just run the sandpaper once or twice up that edge and that's it. I've got the decal to deal with, so I'll move the sandpaper again. Trying to use a new piece of the sandpaper every time I change it. This is definitely going to be a labor of love, is the only nice way to say it. But every one of the restorations at this point in the winter, when we got snowed in and when it got really nasty out, I was not this far along. So I guess I should be happy. We are in good shape. Spring is still a long ways away, and we still have a lot of little stuff, a lot of little details on this bike. That the lighting, I got some polishing I need to do. And we try to send out a video every day of what we're doing in the shop. Maybe we skip a day now and then because we have a real life goes on at the same time as this. And I try never to devote more than about 4 hours a day to this, because then I start getting an unbalanced life where I'm not enjoying it. 4 hours a day is about my limit anyway. 4 cups of coffee and 4 hours of work. I guess it works out good. Anyway, that sanding stick is a great thing on a small part where you have to get in and out and in and out and in and out. This is really worth its weight in gold. Now this is always one of the spots that I try to be super, super accurate with. I always save some of the paint, because what I don't want to happen is I get to this point and I only have thinned paint. I need the tiny little amount here on the fairing, and I don't know why that scratched, chipped, whatever you want to call that, but the clear will bury that and you won't even see it. But it's best if you have, for sure, full strength paint. Now I looked around, there weren't any other real issues I had to deal with, so pretty much we're ready for, and I'm going to be really patient for that day to actually put the clear on. Today is not that day. This part is totally sanded out. We are ready for that magic day, and I know that magic day is coming soon to put the clear on this, but boy, it never warmed up today. Still freezing out there. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.